Some of the hardest Pokemon to catch in any game are the legendary Pokemon. These Pokemon usually require a Master Ball just to get them. But what legendary Pokemon are the most deserving of this once-in-a-playthrough Pokeball? Today, I want to break down the top 10 hardest to catch legendary Pokemon so you guys can find out what legendaries truly are the most difficult to obtain among the entire list. Considering almost every legendary has a catch rate of 3 anyway, catch rate will almost never come into play for this list, though there are a couple of entries that are still on the list despite having a higher catch rate, and that's mostly due to how you find them. Outside of how you encounter the Pokemon, I'll also take into account how threatening these legendaries are, since stronger legendaries will be able to potentially beat your entire team before you can even throw a Pokeball at them. Also, I am counting mythicals on this list. I just wanted to keep them together for the sake of convenience. With that said, let's start off our first entry. But before that, Mismagius, Heartgold, Randomizer, Hardcore Nuzlocke. Link in the description below. Starting our list today is a huge group of legends, being the roaming legendaries. This one includes plenty of Pokemon, with the full list being the legendary birds, the legendary beasts, the Lati twins, Mesprit, Cresselia, Thundurus, and Tornadus, and the Galar bird trio. It'd be unfair to necessarily rank any one of these separately, considering the same issue is apparent with all these legendaries, being the fact you never get the chance to truly battle these Pokemon. You'll only get a single chance to either attack or throw a ball at any roaming legendary before they completely run away, before going to an entirely new location. There's not exactly a lot of specifics here due to the fact that roaming legendary Pokemon are all pretty quick battles that just reset. They aren't going to break your team, and at the same time you will either catch these in a quick ball or fail the encounter and try again later. These definitely are difficult encounters, but in my eyes, the greater issue with roaming Pokemon is more how they contribute to the difficulty of later entries on this list today. So now that we've established roaming Pokemon as difficult Pokemon, what if I told you our number 9 entry required you to find 2 roaming legendaries to unlock its encounter? Going into our 9th space today, we have none other than Landorus, which in multiple generations is going to require you to find both Thundurus and Tornadus in order to unlock its encounter. In Generation 5, this requires you to find the roaming genies. And despite Tornadus and Thundurus not roaming in Generation 6 and later, you'll still typically have to find them by chance. In Generation 6 through 8, you have to find these from some form of a random encounter method, with Generation 6 requiring you to use Soaring in the Sky, Generation 7, it's Ultra Space, and Generation 8 is the Dynamax Adventures. If that's not enough, you'll also need to own multiple versions of each generation's games, since Tornadus and Thundurus are both version-exclusive legendaries. While you can, in later generations, just transfer a Tornadus and Thundurus you already own, in Generation 5 at least, there are no ways to get around the requirement of finding these roaming. Landing this into our number 9 space today. Paldea gave us one of the few games where our legendary Pokemon proved to be fairly difficult encounters, despite not having the typical catch rate of 3. Coming in at number 8 on our list today, we have the Ruined Quartet from Scarlet and Violet. For those who don't know, this includes the new Dark-type group of legendaries, being Chien-Pao, Chi-Yu, Ting-Lu, and Wo-Chien, and they prove to be rather difficult to obtain. These are probably some of the more unique legendaries to make the list today, since each legendary Pokemon ends up requiring you to find 8 items across the region. With the Ruined Quartet, each Pokemon gets 8 stakes you'll need to find around the Paldea region, each in a separate quadrant of the map. All 4 Ruined legendaries prove to be fairly even in terms of difficulty to encounter, and it only gets worse when you also account for how strong these Pokemon end up being when you encounter them. Besides Wo-Chien, these all deal high amounts of damage, with Wo-Chien still having Giga Drain to restore health while you struggle to catch it. Overall, Scarlet and Violet managed to make legendaries you have to truly earn again, and the Ruined Quartet earns a strong spot at number 8. One of the most difficult to obtain legendary Pokemon of the day is also one of the mythical Pokemon that you need multiple games to encounter, with our number 7 entry being Meltan. Meltan requires you to use a couple games in order to obtain it, with the main ones being Pokemon Go and Pokemon Home. You need to transfer a Pokemon from Pokemon Go to Pokemon Home in order to unlock a mystery box, which allows you a 60-minute timer to catch Meltan in Pokemon Go. If you're looking to obtain Meltan in a mainline game, you're out of luck, since you're required to transfer it through Pokemon Go to Pokemon Home. Or you're out of luck. Meltan being one of the only Pokemon that truly require multiple games is, in my eyes, establishes itself as a strong entry on our list today. Since while it's not necessarily hard to catch, it's very tedious to obtain. Continuing our stretch of mythical Pokemon, we have our former event-exclusive legendary, Deoxys. Deoxys can only be caught in the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire games, or you'll be required to instead find this through some sort of event like the Aurora ticket in Fire Red and Leaf Green. The hardest encounter though is going to be its encounter in Oras. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, you'll find this at the end of the Delta episode as a level 80 encounter. While Deoxys doesn't have the best moveset, the strong stat spread as well as the inclusion of your Psychic Stab and Zen Headbutt means you'll be taking serious damage without a Dark type on your team. Having to deal with a level 80 Pokemon is already difficult enough, but considering Deoxys also has a rather frail defensive spread, you'll have to be extra careful damaging it to ensure you'll weaken it just enough to be able to capture it. When you add in the catch rate of 3, Deoxys proves to be an obnoxious legendary to catch, and I'd say that's enough to give Deoxys number 6 on our list today. Starting off the top half of our list, we have a rather convoluted Pokemon to encounter that proves to be one of the only Pokemon that typically require multiple games to encounter, Phione. Phione has a few methods to obtain, with the first one being to breed a Manaphy. The original way you'd obtain a Manaphy would be through transferring a Manaphy egg from Pokemon Ranger, then breeding a Manaphy with a Ditto to receive a Phione egg. You can also use a Manaphy from an event for this, but that'll require you making sure there is a Manaphy event going on to begin with, making this less likely you'll be able to do if you want to get a Phione now. You can, however, get a Phione in one other game, being Pokemon Legends Arceus. Legends Arceus provided a way to get so many Sinnoh mythicals such as Manaphy, which after catching Manaphy in one of the later quests in the game, you'll be able to catch up to 3 Phione per save file. Even if you can finally catch this Pokemon without needing to breed a Manaphy, it still proves to be such a tedious encounter to get for the worst legendary Pokemon of all time. And it makes Phione honestly not worth even obtaining outside of finishing a living Pokedex. One of the most annoying legendaries to get back in the day was easily the Regi trio, our number 4 spot on today's list. The Regis were around in an age before everyone just looked up a guide to get these Pokemon on the internet with ease, and it was a rather difficult encounter to just happen to solve. To get the Regis, you needed to solve a different Braille puzzle for each temple, which would tell you a different means to unlock the gate. To unlock the chambers at all, players needed a Pokemon with Dig, as well as a Relicanth in the front of their party, and a Wailord in the 6th spot. You'll bring these to the sealed chamber and use Dig to open the first door, and talk to the final Braille tablet with the Relicanth and Wailord in the correct spaces in order to unlock the temples. The other Regis have a Braille puzzle of their own, which involves methods like not moving for 2 minutes for Regice, using Strength on a specific cave tile for Regirock, and using Fly in the middle of the room for Registeel. How anyone could figure this out without a guide really baffles me. These almost managed to make our top 3, but they play into the difficulty of our next Pokemon's ranking. On the topic of the Regi trio, what if I told you there's a Regi that requires you to get all 3 of these to unlock? In most generations, in order to obtain our third place Pokemon, Regigigas, you need to obtain all 3 of the Regi trio and have them all in your party in order to even unlock the location for this Titan. Besides Generation 7, you're required to have all the Regis in your party in order to obtain Regigigas, which can prove to be rather tedious, especially in Oras where you have the Braille puzzles again. Speaking of, in Sword and Shield, you actually need to have all 5 Regis in your party, with the player only being able to even catch 1 of Regidrago or Regieleki on your save file, meaning you'll need to trade with another player to even catch Regigigas anyway. Regigigas, for a Pokemon that's easily one of the weaker legendaries, has way too difficult of an encounter method. Though, at least it's more interesting to get than a lot of other modern legends. The difference in difficulty from our next 2 legendaries is truly night and day, and I honestly don't think their difficulty is even comparable to the previous 8. Our runner-up, though, is gonna be one of the most notoriously difficult Pokemon to obtain in Pokemon Legends Arceus, Enamorus. Enamorus, like most legendaries in Legends Arceus, is obtainable towards the end of your game, but Enamorus requires a bit more to be caught than other legends. To obtain Enamorus, you need to unlock the post-game missions and then catch all 3 of the other genies as well. While catching 3 Pokemon isn't new, Regigigas needed 5 to be caught in Gen 8. There is one issue that especially will plague anyone trying to obtain this for competitive. Because Pokemon Legends Arceus doesn't show you the IVs of a Pokemon in any way. You need to transfer Enamorus to Pokemon Home to actually check these IVs finally. The issue with this is that you can't viably soft reset for things like a 0 IV Enamorus for Trick Room, which is especially important for its Therian form. And the only way to actually reset for this would require you to use outside tools or play almost the entirety of PLA entirely from scratch. If it wasn't for how obnoxious our number 1 legendary is, yeah, this would probably take the spot. If any other Pokemon was this difficult to obtain, I honestly wouldn't fathom how it makes sense to make one single Pokemon so obnoxious to obtain. But when it comes to catching the deity of the Pokemon world, Arceus, I can kinda get it. In 2022, we finally got legitimate ways to catch this in-game without hacks or events. And let me tell you, it's a handful. Let's start with its easier method, Pokemon Legends Arceus. To catch this in PLA, it's rather simple. You need to catch every non-mythical Pokemon in the game and beat the Volo battle. Then, you have easily one of the most difficult wild Pokemon to fight, which has a super effective judgment that will always use the perfect type against you. Can you believe this is somehow the easier encounter? That's because for catching this in BDSP, you'll need to first beat the entire game for BDSP, and then also have a completed save file for Legends Arceus, where you'll need to have already caught Arceus. Yeah, I'll bite. Arceus, you can have the top spot today. I hope nothing ever manages to beat this. So now that I've given my thoughts on the hardest legendary Pokemon to obtain, what were some that you guys struggled to catch? Whether you agreed to disagreed with my list today, make sure to let me know in the comments below so I can learn what you guys found difficult to get. While you're on the way down there, since you've made it this far, why not leave a like on the video, and consider subscribing to the channel as well. I make a lot of Pokemon Top 10 content and other discussions on the franchise, and if you enjoyed today's list, I'm sure there are plenty of other videos you'll already enjoy, but also still more to come in the future.